Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so welcome. And let me get the camera set up correctly. So welcome. Thursday night yet again, and got some interesting stuff to talk about. A couple of pins that I've made this week. So a couple more mechanical pencils, a new fountain pen. So a lot of things happening and excited to talk about it. So to start out though, how was your week? Did you get anything new? Throw some comments in the chat if you got anything, new pins, new papers, new journals, new anything. It's always great to see what else people are getting as well. So let's start out with something I mentioned last week's stream, or mentioned in last week's stream, that I would be picking up, and that is I got my new rickshaw bags. That was the collaboration with the local Nashville artist Nick Dominguez and the Gentleman Stationer. And you can see that I got two of the three colorways. There's a brown, a green, and then also a purple. And what I'll do is I'll throw a link in the chat here. Hey, Lydia, good to see you. This is a link where you can purchase these now. Some of them have already sold out of the different varieties. Hey, George, good to see you. Yeah, I know a lot of our pen club people picked these up pretty quickly, wanted to support, the local pen club member, but also really cool designs. These are all drawn with fountain pen ink, with multi-shading fountain pen inks if you want to get specific. And let me zoom in a little here. So you can see the detail too of the printing is pretty amazing on these to get it, that well defined. And I like that each pattern of the three has a little bit different clouds. The purple one has like some little shadowed clouds that are like on the white patches, so it even has shadow below it. I really like that, but I wanted to be conservative and only get two. And I already own a couple of Sinclair, so this is my first Fillmore. So if you're not familiar, the Fillmore it opens up like a book compared to a Sinclair that just kind of opens on the top. So I wanted to give this a shot. It's got room for 6 pins, and I know there's some people that they don't necessarily like this because they're afraid pins are going to hit. But in looking at it, let me see if I can get this. The way it's stitched with the binding here and here, unless you have pins with clips, they're not going to hit. And a lot of my pins, all of these in here are ones that I've made, and I don't have clips. And I actually don't. Lately, I've been in a clipless pin era, so it hasn't bothered me as much. So it's just something to be aware of. And Adelina, yeah, you're right. The sleeve, I really love having one of these. I didn't own a 2-pin sleeve. I own some of the 1-pin, like I have one from Skogsy and one from Amarillo Stationery, and then I have a 3-pin from Amarillo, but I didn't own a 2-pin. So, you got to get the variety in the set. But I really like how this turned out. I have some work travel coming up in a couple weeks. I'm going to probably try and limit myself to, yeah, a little bit, Adeline. Yeah, and then that's something too. I know Olive Octopus talks about in her Fillmore. She'll put the 2-pin in there, and that gives an extra buffer, so you can easily fit that, like George was saying in the chat there. So you can, have that and still kind of let it function like a Sinclair if you want to, or you don't have to unzip it all the way. But you've got the outside pocket, you've got the extra inside pocket. So really pleased with how this turned out. And it happened to work out. So I kind of transition here a little bit. This is a pin that I made this last week that, due to an error, is now essentially a prototype. If you'll notice, this is a shorter pin than some of the others. And this one is for either cartridges or a Kaweco converter only. And I'll show why, because I had another pin that had a similar issue that I brought the remnants of one of the attempts. So let me get this slid over to the side here. Okay, so this at one point in time was going to be the section of a pin I'll show a little bit later in the stream that was finished, and we'll be going to one of the YouTube channel members. Hey, Fuzzy Turnip, good to see you. So as you can see here, that's section threads, and this was not turned down. And here's why. So a lot of these materials can be very brittle. Let me see if I can get this to focus. You can see that as I was just tapping it to add the threads on there, it just split down the middle. And this was the third attempt at making a section for this particular pin, just due to all sorts of issues. So luckily I was able to go back to the first one, and now that I've made a few more, I'm only up to 17 pins made. I was able to reverse engineer and figure out what I did. Hey David, good to see you. And I'll show that other pin here. Actually, let me finish showing this a little bit more, and then I'll go to the blue and green that I've nicknamed the Sprite pin that other section was going to be. This one, it has some other finish work that needs to be done, like the bottom is not perfectly flat, because this was just going to be my pocket / personal tester, but there's some people who've already shown interest in potentially liking to own this pin, so there's a good chance it'll go to somebody once I've had a chance to tweak some things on it and fix. But this one, I did really like how the section shaping turned out. It kind of looks like a castle from a chess piece or a pawn. But as I was saying, this one, because of the length I had to shorten the body, this one currently has a Kaweco converter in it, or it will fit a cartridge. So it gives some variability in what I can make in terms of length. I'm not the biggest pocket pin user, but I don't have the largest hands. But this is like, if I had it about a half an inch shorter, it would be uncomfortable to write. But this is also the first pin I intentionally made that posts. So just doing the right amount of taper and then the right amount of leeway on the inside here, and then getting it polished so it doesn't leave marks from the threads. So this is essentially a posting pocket pin of sorts. And yeah, I'm really liking how this turned out. The material, that's still one of the biggest surprises to me, is how the material starts and how it ends up. Completely different worlds. But yeah, this is going to get some more testing. And like I said, there's already somebody in our local pin club who's claimed dibs if I decide to sell it. And I would honor that because they asked first. But the colors on this, and the camera is kind of picking it up, but this is a diamond cast. So there's actually sparkle all in here that the lights don't show as well. This glows in the sun when you get like good natural light on it. So that was an experiment, or a potential failed pin. Let me see, Fuzzy Turnip, 3776. So here's two different 3776s. So it is about a half inch shorter. It goes to pretty much from tip to the bottom cap band on a 3776 for your size reference there. And then a lot of the other pins that I've made, just for size comparison's sake, they are about just slightly longer. So it's not a world of difference, but it's enough for it to kind of have some of that variability. And since I'm not the biggest pocket pin user, that's what I wanted to really test on this, is how does the posting work? Does it feel balanced when it's posted? And it, so far, so good. I'll have to get some other people to kind of write with it some who are more pocket pin savvy, you might say, and see what their thoughts are. But overall, I was able to save it from what happened is the threads cracked on me. So similar thing, some of these brittle materials, when the threads cracked, what I was able to do, and I have a pin that I was working on and found an issue that I'll show here in a second, and what the issue was, and I was able to save it. So I essentially had threads that didn't work. I cut them off, took a little bit more of the body out, and then added in new threads, and I like how it turned out, and I'm getting better at the tapering and some of that. So very pleased with that. So let's get on to the green pin. This is the official finished pin number 17. That was number 16 was the pocket pin. Let me zoom this out slightly. Well, I guess that's showing well. So this is the first 12 channel members. Didn't know at the time. And once I got into making pins, I decided, as a way of saying thanks for the support from the start and ongoing, they were ending up with a pin. So the first 3 have already been distributed. Well, 3 of the 12 have been distributed. One kind of jumped out of order because they're local, and it was actually Nick who made the designs for the rickshaw. He just showed up at the house one day and gave me some blanks. And of course, what's the first thing I want to do is make a pin out of one. So that kind of went through. And then Olive Octopus has number 2. And then Tim, who I don't think is in the chat that I've seen so far, he has number 1. So this will be technically channel member number 3. I've nicknamed this the Sprite pin, and this is the pin so far that has fought me the most. It's gone through 3 sections, having to go back and, when fixing one little issue, that led to another issue that then the converter wouldn't fit. So luckily, my previous attempts at doing some of those remediation items ended in structural failure. I was able to get this one fully fixed up and get the tolerances because one thing that I've been trying to do is when you put the section in, if you notice, it sits in there a little bit before the threads start screwing in, and that lets it get a nice tight fit between the section and the body. And it also makes sure that the threads maintain the concentricity, which is my favorite fancy new word related to pin turning, so that everything is lined up straight and even around the outer edges. And the pin I have here that I had to fix something for earlier today, I noticed an issue of some pins that I kind of roughed finished last night. Some of these tolerances get down into the thousandths of an inch. So these are 3 materials that I picked up from Daryl, who D2 Arts, he's the one who made this pin that I've done the video on. So he also does materials, and great material. And I was really excited to play with these. And then when I got them kind of roughed out, I was sitting at my desk this morning, and I don't know if the camera's going to show this, but see the fingernail just ever so slightly catches on that side and doesn't on that side. Well, I didn't know what was happening. So in talking to a couple other pin makers today, Luke from Papa J, Nick Pasquale, and Rob from Rob's Pinworks, I found out what the issue was. I'm showing that just on the phone. That little bit of curly Q mess of shavings was underneath the die, and that had the thread canted so that everything was just ever so slightly off. I mean, it looks like from camera view, oh yeah, that's all in line. Well, it was not, and this shows it here. You can see that that's angled ever so slightly, and that was from that little bit of gunk underneath the die. So I was able to clean that out, recut the end off, and now the threads are nice and perfectly round. You got the same amount of dimension over there, but with materials being materials, as you can see, something's not right with the cap, and trying to cut it down because of those reliefs like I was showing on the section. You want a little bit of relief before it starts threading, so you're not sitting there having to thread forever. Well, that one had an extra deep relief because I was trying to do a little bit more of a relief behind the threads just for a little bit of a different look. So this cap has decided to end up in the trial and error bin. And then luckily, of the blanks that I had this with, I have 2 more of this same blank from Daryl. It's like raspberry something is in the name that he has on his site. So this is going to become another pocket variant pin, and I'm excited to see what this looks like once it's polished. The purples and the colors in here are really gonna come through, and I'll just make another cap that will go on here. And that's the nice thing with some of these materials like this, is you kind of get a mix regardless of what it is. So even using a different blank, it's still gonna have a good look, because it's gonna be the same material that's matched. And these I had not yet turned down, so I'll do the same thing. So I'm gonna end up with 3 of these cartridge only, because I want the threads to be perfectly straight. The pet peeve of mine, if I see pins and they're not, I wouldn't want to buy that. So therefore I wouldn't want to make one that goes out that does that. So these will get their threads chopped down, another little offset put in, turned down, and then retapped so that everything is lined up straight. And then these will be cool to finish, because these materials are all going to be somewhat semi-transparent, so they will get the internal polishing, kind of like the one that I showed last week that Nick ended up with, and then Olive Octopus. And Lisa, I don't know if you've posted a picture of the pin that you ended up with anywhere like yet, but I know it's been in a couple of Discords and whatnot. But I love that material, how it turned out. But this one here, you can see that's all somewhat transparent. So once that's turned down, that's really going to have a cool look, with that kind of cool blue fading to purple, fading to whites. So we'll see how these end up. And I don't know if these will end up being some of the ones that go to the first 12 people, because they will not fit a true converter. So I might give an option. I don't know. For an unexpected free pin, I'm kind of taking my leeway with what I make, using it as a chance to experiment and try new things. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm glad to get some new material. As you can see, this diamond cast, some of this came with when I got the lathe, and it is by far not my favorite material at all to use, but I have it, so I'm trying to make the best of it, what I have. But getting these blanks from Daryl, and I have 4 blanks from Lisa Marie at Poorly Controlled. So, Chinaman, check the YouTube channel members. You're already on the list, but we have a Discord now for the channel members, and you can get signed up in there, and that's where I'm tracking everything. So if you look back on like the YouTube post for the channel, there's a link that's for members only that will show you how to get to the right place. And if not, you can reach out to me through email, and I can get you pointed there as well. I've been trying to catch up with people as I've come across them, either in chats or whatnot, because it's going to be a bit before I get all these made. But I already have some people's information from the letters list, so you might have just had a pin show up even if you aren't on there. But yeah, definitely check that out. And if you want to get on that list, I did add a channel membership level that a couple people in the chat have signed up for. That it's the $9.99 a month, and after 10 months you get a pin. So essentially $100 maker pin after 10 months. I figured that's a good way to give me more time to make pins, improve quality, and it's a way to get something back for helping support a fledgling creator who's now getting into pin making and jumping well into the deep end. Yeah, the pin that Lisa ended up with, that material, I've already reached out to Luke from Papa J saying I want some more. And it was one of his first ones he made. So he thinks he has the recipe, but it just has this cool glowing effect. And I did also now have silver tone and gold tone Yovo 6 nibs. That's what I'm doing for here. So yeah, if you're not a channel member and you're interested in joining, the link is in the description as well. And also, if you're not on the list to receive postcards or letters, there's a Google form in the video description. And I have some work travel coming up where I'm going to be headed down to San Antonio. So I'm going to try and find airport postcards and San Antonio postcards while I'm there to maybe send some of those out. And then, thanks to having pen friends in the San Antonio area, I think there's going to be an impromptu pin club-ish meetup with the San Antonio Pin Club the Sunday night before I have to do day job the next couple days. The reason I'm going there, so that'll be fun. We'll get to see week 2's possibly Queen of Washi and some other people that I recognize usernames, but I've never really talked too much. So that'll be fun. I know a lot of the San Antonio people make it to the Arkansas Pin Show, so I'm looking forward to that. And then also having to decide, okay, I'm going for work. What pins am I taking, and what pencils, and what items? So, let's see, George is saying, like syringe filling a cartridge, then using a converter. And I generally agree with that. I had this little converter, and I think it's the particular nib. So that's one thing in buying nibs in bulk. So let me zoom out, but in order to get the a little bit of a cost break when buying nibs, I had to buy 50. So I have all the nibs in either silver and gold tone, and most of these are not necessarily tuned. Some of them have been perfectly fine. Some of them might need a little bit of tweaking. So the nib that's actually in this pin, Matthew Chin, is going to be at Gentleman Stationer a week from Saturday, and I will be getting that one tuned just to have it, a little bit smoother writing. And I think it's getting a little bit of a glitch when I write. And I tried the cartridge first, and I also tried the converter. So I think it's the nib, but I don't want to burn through a bunch of new nibs just to try that. And so hopefully just getting that kind of tuned a little bit, or I might just find a different nib and put in there. But I'm trying to reuse the same nib, so that way I'm not dipping into ones that could go for pins that are being made. But excited for all that. And so if you're in the Nashville area, definitely check out, and here's a link that I will put in the description as well. There are appointments that you can sign up for through the Gentleman Stationer site. For Matthew, it's like at a $35, and 30 of that goes towards the nib grind, just to be sure that appointments are honored, which I think is very reasonable for the nib grinder, because it's going towards it. And then the $5, it's the overhead of having a nib grinder come local, which also supporting the nib grinder, the local stores, always a good thing in all those regards. So the other thing that came in, a couple of other titanium things, because titanium. So I wanted to get another mechanical pencil, because if you saw last week's stream, just for partial reference, I've been going down the pencil deep end lately. This is just what happened to be sitting on the top of my desk at the moment, and I'm really loving the pencils, and I've really liked using them more than I ever thought in my planner. And then I use the Kikuyo Mark Plus with the double tip markers, and I'll go highlight colors after the fact to keep stuff visually organized. And that's been really cool. So when I wanted to order another spoke, this is the Model 8 that I got and talked about, or one of the Model 8s that I got that I talked about a couple weeks ago. And I put a different color clip on this from my CX, which is one of the pins. So that way I can tell that this one has a B lead in it, and then this one has HB lead. And then I do the next thing. I got a Model 7 that has no clip, and I just have one of them, so it's easy to know what lead is in it. And this is actually a 0.7 millimeter versus a 0.5. I've found, ever since I started using these lead holders and some of the pencils, I'm really liking the 0.7 millimeter lead, which I never would have guessed. Thought 0.5 was just what you used in mechanicals. And between this and then the TWSBI Precision that I picked up at Gentleman Stationer a couple weeks ago, both of these are 0.7. And then of the lower end TWSBI line, the Pagoda. So I have 3.7 millimeter pencils now. And these are getting more use. This has kind of become my take into the garage with me pencil with the rotor Faden. That's kind of my pen making tracker. I've tracked every pen I've made. I have dimensions in there. And it's one of the first times I've ever really made an index, kind of bullet journal style, and have all that tracked. But I'm really liking the pencils. And then since I was placing the order anyway, I finally broke down and ordered a spoke axle, which is one of their fountain pens. And I used this yesterday, yesterday. And I wrote about a page and a half of A5 in the journal, and I really liked it. It's very similar in dimension to my Matthew Martin pen. TL3721. I also write small. What size generally are the nibs you use? Use broader nibs. Okay, so yes. Every nib I have is extra fine or smaller. And hey, David, good to see you. And also, David, Chinaman was asking earlier, double check so we can get you on the Discord as well, because the first 12 channel supporters are going to end up with pins. And I don't think you were on there yet. But let me get back to what TL3721 was asking about Kodachi and grinds and writing small. So here's some random scratch paper. This is my Newton Prospector, and this has a Kodachi in it. So if you write tiny, and this is the light's gonna be, David, if you look in the YouTube post for the channel, I have a link there that went to channel member. So since you're a member, it'll show you, and it's got a link that it should take you to it. And if not, I'll make a new post after the thread tonight. It'll have it there. So if you check that, I'll tag it to channel member so we can be sure you get on there. You're already on the list to receive your pin, but that way you can see progress and whatnot. So with a Kodachi, if you're writing with a higher angle, and if you're not familiar with Kodachi, it's one of Matthew Chin's grinds. So when you write taller, it's a thinner line. If you relax your hand, it's a thicker line. So I can write with my normal writing with a Kodachi very easily, and do my normal print, because I do everything, and I do print almost exclusively. I've been trying to get back cursive writing skills, and it's not going all that well, and that's why I started writing in print to begin with, because my cursive was very illegible. So I'm trying, but most of my writing is print. So I find a Kodachi works well. I have a bunch of extra fine nibs. I have the Pilot 912 with the posting nib, which, if you're not familiar with the posting, it's a gold nib. I think the modern equivalent would be kind of the Matthew does a beak, and that's not showing up. Let me see if I can. Yeah, that's showing better. You can see it kind of has that little curve down. Now it's gold, but in talking to Matthew a while back, with modern steel nibs, you don't necessarily have the need for the gold to get this kind of writing anymore. This was at a time when there weren't steel nibs when this was first made. So the PO nib is an option. Let's see what else. Just to grab another couple pins that are right here. This one is a Matthew Martin OG1 in Peak. This one has the Kirk Spear needlepoint in it. So I got that ground by my friend who went when she was at Dallas, and got that ground for me and mailed it back to me. So that's his needlepoint. So that's another option. The broadest nib I use is a couple of and these are probably dried out because I haven't used them in a bit. My Diplomat Arrow came with a fine nib. I started this Kodachi as a medium, and I talked to Matthew and Sean at the Arkansas Pin Show. That's when I bought the pin, and Matthew was opposite of Sean. So I said, okay, Matthew, you see how I write. What nib should I start with? and he said I would start with a medium. So he took a medium down to a Kodachi. So that's where, if you have the chance to talk to who's doing, talk to a grinder versus ordering one online or something like that, you can kind of get it customized. Now, my SIG grinds from Franklin Christoph that Audrey does, both of those, or all three of those, I have a gold one and 2 steel. Those all started as an extra fine, and then they're ground to the SIG, so it gives a little bit of variation. And let's see, do I have a SIG in this one now? Yeah, so this is the gold SIG. And let me try and change this light real quick so that what I'm writing here will show a little better. Well, if I can find the right setting. There we go. Okay, so let's darken this down a little. Okay, now we can kind of see what we're looking at here. So with the SIG, if I do normal printing, I can still do my small writing, but you see a little bit of the variation. So, this is going to be better for someone who's writing in cursive, but it still works if you use block writing printing. So, and I have the initial video I made when I was still pretty new at YouTube of 15 extra fine nibs. Well, one reason why I have some of these others is because I'm planning on remaking that. And I actually have in the front of my plotter here, I'm up to more than 26. This is the 26 I had written down before I got some others added in that'll be in there. So I've got like everything from a Pilot Kakuno extra fine, the posting nib, an Opus 88, which has a Yovo 5, a Yovo 6, a Bach extra fine, a Twisby 580. I've got coated nibs, ground nibs, just about everything I can find. I've got Kirk's Tetanus. I got Matthew's needlepoint. I have the Nagahara needlepoint. So I kind of got a little bit overwhelmed in how to film it and do it well. So that's been on the planning for a while. And one, it just took lead time to get the variety of nibs that I'd like to have in there, because a lot of content you see is not for those of us who write tiny. It's for people who want shimmery, massive writing and whatnot, which is great if that's what you like writing with, but that's not me. I want the tiny nibs, and then figuring out what ink. So like this one's Matthews, and I started to get a lot more of the engraved nibs so I can easily tell what's what. So this is Matthew's needlepoint, and I was going to get him, and that one's dried out a little. So definitely just talk if you're going to get a grind. And like David saying, Matthew is one of the most traveling nib grinders I'm aware of. He is going to be at Drum Goals if you're in the Texas area. He'll be at the Arkansas show. He'll probably be at California. I don't know if he's at Philly this weekend, but he's all over the place. And any of the nib grinders, they're going to have their version of some of these. If you're looking production, this is a Platinum 3776 extra fine. This is the ultra extra fine, that posting nib I showed. Those are going to be probably the production smallest nibs you're going to come across. And then you add in grinds. And even with grinds, they're not always, or with production nibs, like I said, the Diplomat, it writes finer than some of my extra fines, or like the Pilot 823. This one I obviously haven't used in a bit. You can see the ink had been settled down in there. This is a fine nib, and it writes, and was in my first extra fine video, because it writes finer than some of my extra fines as well. So hopefully that helps. Pretty much though, if you want writing small, avoid your Pelicans, avoid your Lamis. They're all going to be one size up. You can get them sized down, but in terms of production, an extra fine German nib is going to be probably wider than you would prefer if you like tiny writing. So just some things to keep in mind. So So hopefully that's helpful. That's one thing I do love. I love talking extra fine or smaller nibs. And even the spoke nib that came with this, currently all Brad had was mediums. So that's the other thing I'm going to get. Oh, my computer just locked on me. Hopefully that did not drop the screen. Okay. Sorry, moved the mouse to the wrong corner and it locked my screen. So that's the other nib that I'm at least going to get ground by Matthew, probably to just like a Japanese extra fine. He did that on my Esterbrook Raven. And Fuzzy Turnip, you're not wrong. The Diplomat extra fine, or the Diplomat number 6, and the Opus 88. They do, both of those companies do their own in-house tuning. And if you want a smooth, great writer out of the box, I have Opus 88, sort of like wonderful, starting out of the box. And the Diplomats I've been very pleased with as well. Of the Viper, it's a fine medium, so it's kind of a special case. But I have also the Alox, and this one is an actual extra fine, I think. Yeah, this one's an extra fine, and this one might have dried out. Yeah, that's one problem I've been running into. I do my best to rotate through all the pins, but I had 51 pins I picked up last year, so I'm even with doing a concerted effort to use them all, there's some that get used less. So just something I battle with. It's a good problem to have, but it is still a problem in some regards. So hopefully that answers your question. Probably more than you were bargaining for about extra fine nibs, but that is something I enjoy talking about because there's not as much content out there for those of us who write small. I do own a couple of nibs and all my wife's pins. She has like one extra fine, and then she has mediums and broad nibs. And if I try and write with them, or even my tester pins that I have for doing paper testing, I mean, if you look at any of my paper testing videos, when I try and do my normal print with like the broad nib, it's like a water hose. So could I write with it? Yes. Do I write bigger on some video stuff than I normally do? Yes. Is it how I'm going to use it on the regular basis? No. So, that's where I want to be cognizant of getting things that I'm going to actually use consistently versus on rare occasion. And that, can't always happen, but it's something I've been trying to accomplish. But you can see though, that like this one was sitting to this side. This is the Nagahara. I picked this one up the other night because when I was playing around with the brownish coffee pen, and this is my Lilliput, which I originally got to carry around in my Otter Mini 5 wallet. And okay, camera zoom. Okay, it's just being screwy. And this cartridge was still in there, and I actually wrote about a page with the Lilliput, and it's such a small diameter, but I actually appreciated it more than I did when I first got it. So that's the other thing, is kind of rediscovering pins that I own. Because I think most of the pins that I will get this year will be either, probably more than likely, pin materials, and I'm going to try and make more pins to use, or get maker pins versus production pins. And with the ease of swapping nibs in and out, that's, I think, going to be more fun. Or just, maybe using the same nib. It's like when Olive Octopus got her pin at Pen Club. She just took the nib out in the converter of a different pen that was already inked and put it in the new one and had it writing. And I was like, oh, that kind of clicked of, why am I not doing that more? All these nibs can interchange. Why am I not hot swapping and using different pens? So if I want to have consistency in ink color or something like that, I can get away with it, but also, use more of the pins. So that's just something I've been playing around with. But okay, so let's see. We talked about the Fillmore stuff. We talked about the pencils. What was the other thing that I had? Oh, so trying to in in making pins, something I've been doing just as kind of a side project that led me down the pencil rabbit hole is I've been trying to draw some of the pins that I've made with dimensions, kind of technical esque drawings. And you can see over my shoulder, I showed the drafting table last week. Well, it got worse. Let me see if I can. Nope, that's the wrong camera. Which one do I want? I want that one. So I now have a drafting arm that I found for a steal on Marketplace with another drafting table that, luckily worked out perfectly for Beth as a cutting table for sewing. But I got the drafting arm because if I'm going to learn something, of course I'm going to learn it the hardest, most complicated way without reading instructions. So I've been trying to learn how to use a drafting arm to draw the technicalist drawings. And you can also see a typewriter there that I've been trying to get working better. Because I also might have found another typewriter on a Goodwill auction that will be here Saturday. Jump full into your hobbies. I can't say not to. As someone at Pen Club said, is I collect hobbies and then bring other people along with me, and I would be lying if I didn't agree with that. But it's not a bad thing necessarily. So that's been some of the other things I've been working on. And then I had been neglecting journaling somewhat. So I spent the other day with the axle and the Lilliput and whatnot. And got caught up, and I've been setting aside time like every 2 nights, like not going to the garage to work on pins. And David is very good that it will be number 8, but who's counting? One of them was given to me free that's in the garage that the carriage doesn't move and I haven't even looked at, but this one was untested at Goodwill. I got it for like $22 before shipping, and if it works somewhat, it'll be worth it. It's a Smith Corona that has the hard shell case. It's a Corsair Deluxe, and it's kind of a turquoise blue, and it just looks cool if nothing else. But the Smith Coronas from all of my typewriter friends who own them, and the one that I have, they seem to be pretty bulletproof. So that's my theory, is it wasn't tested by Goodwill because it didn't have a ribbon in it. So I'm hoping I got a steal. Yeah, David, it's I think this is, I couldn't see serial or anything on it, but it's the full manual Corsair Deluxe. So you can find pictures of those online, and fully restored, they go for a couple $100. So even if it's partially working, turns out there's a typewriter. We have Nashville Typewriter, which is in Goodlettsville, which is north of Nashville. Well, in Murfreesboro, which is closer to where I live, there's an Etsy seller who buys and repairs and sells typewriters. And I'm going to go meet up with him at some point. And he's going to take an extra set of eyes of looking at the typewriter that's on the desk, of trying to figure out why the reversing mechanism isn't working. So, why not jump in and, possibly host a type in or something like that? I've already, Lydia, who's in the chat, from Arkansas, I've already said, bringing 2 or 3 typewriters to the pen show with me when I go, because I'm driving, I've got the room. So why not? I think there's a lot of people who, if you've never used a typewriter, there's something in the brain that clicks for me using the typewriters the same way it does using the fountain pen. Just that analog, it's very different. And yeah, I like it. And as y'all can tell, if there's something I'm interested in, I'm probably going to talk about it and drag other people along with me. So, having a small fleet of typewriters makes it much easier to do that, where just find somewhere, set them up, and let people play. And then, finding the other people who are typewriter people who I didn't know they're typewriter people and who are also pen people. There's a lot of the Venn diagram on typewriter owners and fountain pen users and stationery lovers. There's a lot of overlap in those communities. So, even if you try it and it's not for you, I think we all appreciate in some way or another the analog nature of writing. The last thing I want to do at the end of the day is look at another screen. So with using the pens or the typewriters, things like that, that's just made that easier, you know. Oh, David, Dallas Pen Show will be 4 days in 2026. That's interesting. That's a one that's possibly on the list. So that might make it easier going for 2 of the days versus 4. Still trying to figure out, aside from the only shows that are confirmed for me right now are Arkansas and Atlanta, back-to-back weekends. So that's going to be great from a purchasing standpoint. Like I said, hopefully it'll just be more materials than pins, but you never know. You see a pin that speaks to you, and pin show money is different. I think if you've been to a pin show, you probably have that experience. If you get there and you didn't plan on buying anything, and 2 hours later you might have bought a pen or two and some ink and a Galen and who knows what else, and you're like, oh, that's all I'm going to get for this entire weekend, until a couple hours later or the next morning, because it's multiple days, so you have to make another pass and see what else might follow you home. So oh, and so the other thing is, I already have the first guest for season 2 of the podcast scheduled. I have another one that's scheduled a couple weeks out due to theirs timing, so I don't know when they'll go, but hopefully I will have season 2 started within the next couple of weeks. I'd like to ideally have at least 2 episodes recorded before I release the first one. That's something I learned from season 1, is a little bit more scheduling and planning and having recordings in advance is helpful, because not really knowing what I was doing last time, and I didn't want to miss a week, and there were some weeks that I recorded an episode and then it released the next morning, just because scheduling and timing and people having to cancel because life and things like that. So trying to be a little bit more intentional this time, and I think it's going to be a 12 episode season, take a shorter break between seasons and then resume. I think that's going to be a more manageable release cadence of sorts, just to keep things, because I did like the ability for people to talk about things that were timely if they had something they were releasing or things were just released. So the first guest I'll go and say will be Nick, talking about his experience with doing the art with the rickshaw and working with the custom bag aspect, because I find that interesting. I think there's a lot of artists, and seeing how rickshaw can take a drawn design and print at that quality, that really makes it more accessible for artists to get their own artwork on a bag, even if it's in a smaller scale. With rickshaw doing custom bags, how cool would that be to get your own laptop bag made of your art or something like that? Or like in Nick's case, he was able to pair up with Gentleman Stationer and release these cool bags that at least a lot of us locally, and I'm sure others, because we have an active local pen club, but I know there's others that have been shipped around with just the cool design. So Nick will be the first guest, and then once I get a second one confirmed, and I've already reached out to a couple people who scheduling just didn't work at the end of season 1, to try and get that going. So then those would release, hopefully, I think. And this is a question I have for you. If you listen to season 1 or kind of followed along, what's the best day if you were going to have a new content? Are Thursdays good? I had last time it was releasing on Thursday mornings, and that would be, is that a good time for a thing? I try and like this stream Thursday night seemed to not conflict with other people. I know it's can't always work around other people in the community, but you want to support each other and not try and step on timing and toes. Podcasts are a little different because it's not as interactive, but that's also something that I've been looking at. Would it interest people to do some of those recordings as a live stream that also records and releases as a podcast? Because the software I use has that ability. It's not something I've been playing around with as I've been ramping up to get season 2 going, if you think even just some one-ofs or some special cases that might be interesting, let me know in the chat or leave a comment. That would be helpful to see if that's something that would be interesting. I think there's also a way to do an audience participation. So maybe for some guest, do like a Q&A or do it as a special kind of release, getting somebody where, we might be able to do a Q&A session, kind of a moderated panel of sorts. That's interesting to me because I think it would be fun and it's a different way of asking questions. And I love live streaming and the interaction in the chat. So that would be like a double whammy of being able to interact and let people ask questions that they might not have the same accessibility for some of the guests or makers or whomever in the future. So, drop in the chat here or leave a comment afterwards or, reach out to me through social media or whatever. Let me know what your thoughts are because that's something I want to account for. As of now, I'll do probably Thursday mornings again because that's, if people need something to listen to as they're driving to work or commuting or downtime between, weekend activities. Thursday seemed like a good time, but that is not set in stone. So let me know what your thoughts are. And, and also for guests, if you have people you'd like to see be a potential guest, feel free to throw that in the chat here or leave a comment as well. I've got a pretty good list, but, the list is only so long, so I could easily burn through 12 of the maybe 20 I have on the list, obviously within one season. So I want to get in. And then the final question I want to ask just out to the general people who are watching or participating in chat or watching the podcast. Would you like to see people in the community interviewed, not just a creator or a maker or a stationery store owner, but people who are, you might see in chat who are members of the community who they attend things, they're, active, they're participating in streams or chats or, things like that. Is that is there an interest for a guest like that as well? That would be helpful. And then as kind of a side project, I probably will try and interject some of the other interests of mine that are adjacent. Like there's a typewriter store in Chicago. And when I got my second typewriter, I reached out to the owner, Lucas, and he was able to send me a part I needed. But I noticed on one of his YouTube videos, he's a fountain pen user. So you've got a fountain pen user who also happens to own a typewriter repair store. That's interesting to me because, once again, that crossover. So I'm going to interject some of those little adjacent things just because it's another way of, sharing more of the analog hobbies with other people and, letting people get more information. So if they want to look into some of these other things, they have the ability where it's not as, because a typewriter, that can be scary a little bit. Okay, there's typewriters on Marketplace. There's typewriters for sale. The price ranges can be different. If you wanted to get into it, what are you looking at financially? Is it worth buying one that might need some fixing up? Are you a tinkerer who wants to, take a typewriter out of its case? Or do you want to get one that's already fully tuned up and ready to go? So just little things like that, I think would be interesting, Okay, yeah, and Fuzzy Turn Up, that makes sense. I think if I was going to do the live type panel thing, that might almost be more of a doing that on a Thursday night and during this window that I already kind of have established. It's like a special live stream versus doing it as the podcast recording. But, I always looking for ideas because this time seems to work well. We've, been growing and getting good interaction, which I love. The active chat really is great because it gives, been very informative. People and, learning about others who live near them who they didn't know, and now they might be in the same pen club and stuff like that. That's cool to me. So maybe I'll try and do that as a testing those waters and do a interview on a Thursday during the normal kind of stream time as kind of a thing and give some notice, depending on the guest. So if it might get people to join in who might not be aware that there is a stream or something like that. So I'll definitely have to play around with that. But as always, very appreciative of the feedback. I never, content creating wasn't something I ever had on my bingo card ever. Kind of like it though. I like talking about things I'm interested in, and it's its own beast of trying to figure out, I want to be realistic. Like I was talking about the extra fine nibs. If I was to make a video saying, oh, you must get this broad nib and it's the best thing that's ever happened, that would be the most inaccurate statement I think I could ever say. If it's for you, that's great. For me, I think anybody who knows me, if I'm trying to tell someone to use a broad nib, there's probably something wrong. I have not been kidnapped, blink twice type thing, but I want to be genuine to what I'm interested in, but then also help others make connections. So if I don't have the answer, maybe I'll point you to someone who would be a better resource or things like that. Yeah, and I like the adjacent. That's one of my favorite questions I've asked on the season 1, like asking people what their favorite stationery adjacent item is. The cases, the bags, the stuff, because those enhance the hobby regardless of what it is, regardless of whatever hobby you do. It's the quirky tool or the thing that makes the hobby more fun for you. Like last week talking, Rahul, who was on here when he's able to, he didn't really get washi tape, and being able to talk through, oh, this is how I use washi tape, and having people in the chat, that's great. That's informative. And then that's going to be a driver for someone who might not have wanted to ask the question, because I know there's some people who watch who might not want to be in the chat, which I am 100% for if you don't want to be in the chat, but different things like that. Different collectors with different niches. Okay. Yeah, David, I had Matthew and I want to get some other nib grinders, and we're getting into the scheduling time for there. So there's a couple that I need to reach out to still, and a couple that I need to use an intermediary to get good contact information to try and do that. And then that would be interesting for some of the collecting niches of, I know there's a lot of people on the vintage side for very particular things, but I'm sure we can find some kind of specialist in different areas. Like maybe see if I could get Brian Anderson to talk everything vintage Esterbrook, because, that's, if you have a question about a vintage Esterbrook, not the re-Esterbrook, but the old school, Brian is probably the person you'd want to ask. Or, and then on the maker side, I have a different viewpoint now and appreciation of what goes into making a pin. So I think my questions would be very different now that I've done it a little bit, just to add in a different perspective. And then I'm also going to hopefully be able to make it work to do maybe a live interview in a little bit different format at the Arkansas Pin Show, or maybe Atlanta. I think that would be fun as well, because I think in person also has a different vibe to it. And, so these are things that have been running through my head, just trying to get planned out to make happen, and we'll see where they end up. But that's some of the stuff that I have kind of scheduled in terms of season 2, which, like I said, the first one is scheduled, and then hopefully I can get a second one scheduled where that'll give time to get the first one kind of edited and ready to release, and then get that, week ahead rolling, and then add in, if there's something that's more timely, be able to have a little bit more flex time to get those added in and the order along the way. So that's all I really had for, tonight. I should be able to do my normal stream next week, and then I get back from the work trip on a Wednesday, so I should be able to do that. So the next couple of Thursdays should be normal stream times, and I think next week I'm gonna bust out the Dominant Industry book again, and try and do some more of the fountain pen ink art. It's been a bit since I cracked that open, and I think it's time to, attempt more art. And I have some different inks that I think will help with that, or at least that's my theory. A better color palette, because I understand mixing watercolors. I'm not that good with mixing the inks, but Eric from Amarillo a while back sent me, and I actually have in the Axle right now the which one is it? The Azul Frida, and then I also have the yellow one and the pink one, which I cannot think of their names, and they're back on the ink shelf at the moment, so I'll have to see about those as well. But yeah, I think that's going to be next week's stream, and I'll still give an update on how the testing's going on some of the pins and whatnot. But I want to have that be the main focus, and then any updates about the season 2 of the stationery feed and things like that. And that actually gives me one more thought. One final question: do you find value in written blog style post to go along with videos? I have my website that I've had since literally the year 2000, and yeah, Rosa Mexicana and Amarillo Antigo, thank you, Olive Octopus. I was trying to do some written stuff to kind of go along with the videos, but is that something that would be of interest to kind of add in more context that I might not be able to encompass in a video or things like that? If that is of interest, let me know, because the videos kind of auto post to the website now on DWRD.net, which, if you're ever curious about the username, that's the website, and that's kind of how the username came to be. I was able to get a 4-letter domain in the year 2000 for Y2K, a little bit of a flashback. So there are some posts on there now. I haven't done it in a while because, holidays and fighting tech issues where I had the lapse between videos, and even I have a couple things now that I need to try and get filmed to release. I've been in the, using my stuff, and then I need to realize, oh wait, I also, if I want to, talk about this, I need to actually record and not just keep using it. So trying to get those a little bit better scheduling. And I don't know about you, but I tend to work better when I have a lot of things going on, too much downtime, and things can kind of fall through the cracks. So now that I'm trying to make pins, record a podcast, do my day job, make videos, I think it's actually going to be better, because if I stay busy, I have to schedule it more, and then I'm more likely to follow the schedule. So that's the plan, at least. We'll see. But yeah. So David, you think they would be interested? So yeah, I'll probably put a couple of things on there. I'm not going to go full blown, but I've noticed in a lot of the stationery sites that do links and things like that, seems like there's a lot of reading, not just watching, which makes perfect sense. And I hadn't really thought about it in the analog nature of reading, even if it is electronic reading. So I want to try and do a little bit of extra context, or how things came to be, because I think that would be interesting, especially with the pin making, talking through the successes and the failures. The learning process has been very interesting, and I think that is one of the things whenever I do finally make a video about getting into the pin making side. Not just saying, hey, look, I made this cool pin, but hey, look at this thing that failed. Hey, look at this thing I screwed up. Because I find that interesting. I always loved watching how it's made, but they never showed how it's made when stuff didn't work. What happens when their big specialized machinery breaks and they have to fix it, or, things look perfectly in spec and they're thousandths of an inch off, and it, you don't realize what a difference that can make until you're trying to screw a pin on and your nail catches on the cap line. So, that's the kind of thing that I find interesting, just those tolerances and things like that. No, David, I don't think you were on at the beginning. I'll pop back to this one here because, so I found out that my threads were off by about 1/1000th of an inch, where it was kind of canted. And you can see there, in trying to, I was able to fix the threads, but in trying to fix the cap, the material fought and won. But now I know things to check. So next time the threads shouldn't be an issue. So that's a big thing that I've tried to do with this whole process is once something screws up, dig into it, figure out why, so it doesn't happen again. Because that's kind of how my brain functions. Or this is the other one I showed early on in the stream when I was trying to make the section, and this brittle material just decided it didn't want to have threads tapped on it, and it just split down the middle. So some of it's material, some of it's technique. So figuring out what caused the issues, I think that's the only way to get better is, continuing to trial and error and experiment. That's why I like some of these new pins I want to do the product testing on, because yes, it looks good until it doesn't. Or like the first couple of pins I made, I didn't realize I was missing one part of the finishing process, and now the pins look better because I was able to fix that once I knew. I didn't know I was missing it, and then once I found out and was able to fix it, then the finish work got a lot better. So little things like that. But I appreciate you spending some time this evening. As always, I enjoy these live streams, and leave comments if there's anything you want to see or talk about. Next week, I believe, is going to be some art on the menu. And don't forget, if you're not signed up with so Fuzzy Turnip pin making bloopers, I think I could do that, but I'm also at the point, one reason I haven't really, aside from talking about pin making on the stream, I don't want to put a video out that would show something incorrect that someone might look at, and I don't want to lead them in the wrong thing. So, but bloopers, I actually have, believe it or not, have not filmed anything in making pins aside from a picture here or a picture there, because I've been trying to make sure I'm doing it correct. And so that's where I'm trying to navigate through how to do a video that would be interesting, but also there's a lot of stuff that would need to be edited out just because it's kind of the boring stuff, or it's, maybe doing a kind of a combo clip with just a camera rolling, and then I could edit something up after the fact, but I'm not quite there yet. I think I need a little bit, like I said, I'm only at pin number 17. If these 3 come to fruition, then that would be up to 20. So then maybe after 20 or 25, that's when I'll try and add in a video of some sort just to document how it started, how it's going, and where it could end up. But be sure and make sure you're subscribed. If you're not on the list for the letters, the link is in the video description. And then David, I'll repost that link for the members, and Aaron, if you're still in here, you can see it as well, so we can get you all in the Discord. And if you're interested in joining the channel membership, and after 10 months getting a pin, you can follow the link in the video description to become a channel part of the pin club, I think is what I called it. And Fuzzy Turnip, I just saw writing the written post for documenting theirs. That might be a better way, because that's more, if you're interested in it, you can read about it, and then the video might be better to show a finished product or little snippets or something like that. But as always, I appreciate you spending the time, and until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next week.